Good morning, students. Students,
Good morning,
students.
sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Today's today lecture program is Sri Lanka Auditing Standard 2230 relating to documentation. I hope you can see the screen, the auditing standard screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is sometimes called working papers, audit working papers, or documentation. Both terms are same. Audit. In the last lectures, we have discussed relating to the fraud and error. Today's program relating to documentation SLA US 230. First, we will list out what are the areas we are going to cover in this standard. First, you should know the nature and purpose of audit documentation, right? Main area is a purpose or objective of documentation. First is nature and purpose of documentation. Second one, we have to discuss second, we had to discuss objective of auditor to prepare documentation. Objective of auditor. Objective of auditor to prepare documentation. Then some definition also we are going to discuss relating to audit documentation. Audit file. Audit file and experienced auditor. These three areas given for definition. Then we have to discuss form and contents of documentation. Then we have to see the examples of working papers, examples of audit working papers. Then we have to discuss two categories of main working paper in the recurring audit. Recurring audit, working papers can be categorized one permanent audit file and current audit file. Then we also going to discuss relating to safe custody, ownership and retention of working papers. Safe custody, ownership and retention of audit working papers. These are the main areas we are going to discuss in this session, right? First, we are going to discuss nature and purpose of documentation. Second one, we have to discuss objective of auditor is to documentation. Third one, certain terms, definition of certain terms. So you should know what is audit documentation or working papers, then what is audit file or define audit file, experience auditor. These are the three terms given in the auditing standard. Then main area in the standard, form and contents of working papers. You are not using the same working papers to all type of audit, but certain factors affect the form and contents. So we should know what are the factors affect the terms and contents of working papers. Then uh, 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 examples of the audit working papers. There are several type of working papers is available for auditor. You should know what includes in the working papers, what type of files in the working papers. In the recurring audit, next one, in the recurring audit, working papers can be categorized permanent audit file and current audit file. Auditor or students, you should know what is, you should understand what is permanent audit file, what is current audit file, and what are the contents of permanent audit file, what are the contents of current audit file. This is always testing the exam. Several exams this area is testing, and form and contents factors affect the form and contents. Also testing definition of documentation or what do you understand by the documentation, purpose of documentation or objective of documentation, advantages of documentation, and last we are going to discuss safe custody, ownership, and retention of working papers. These are the areas we are going to cover in this standing. Right. First, we will take this first section, nature and purpose of audit documentation. Audit documentation, that means the requirements of the Sri Lanka auditing standard and the specific documentation requirements of other 11 Sri Lanka auditing standards provide. These are the requirements, right? Auditing standard requirements. Why should you document? The auditor, why you should document? What are the requirements? Evidence for the auditors, basis for conclusion about the achievement of overall objective of the auditor. So, that this documentation of working papers provides audit evidence for the work done, the proper work done. So without evidence, you can't prove the work is done. So that is why evidence for the auditor's basis for the conclusion about the achievement of overall objective of the auditor. So the to achieve the overall audit objective or the basis for the conclusion, the evidence, the working papers provides all the evidence for the basis for the conclusion and achievement of the objective. The second requirements is evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with Sri Lanka auditing standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. If the problems comes to auditor, right, you may have to prove the audit was carried out. The audit means planning and performance of the audit is carried out based on the Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements to prove those things. So the auditor should document all the matters relating to the auditor. Or auditor must have a working paper to prove planning and performing the audit in accordance with the Sri Lanka auditing standard and legal and other applicable regulatory requirements. Somebody charge you. So this audit is, the report is stated that audit was, every audit report there's a word, our audit was carried out in accordance with Sri Lanka auditing standard. Somebody is challenged. They are not followed the working, they are not followed the auditing standard to perform the audit, plan the audit or performing the audit. So you can prove the working papers, through the working papers, you can prove the work is done, the plan, audit plan, performance, all is in accordance with the Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable regulatory requirements. These are the requirements to have the audit documentation or working papers, right? Then additional purposes. Additional purposes. This the exam purpose sometimes may be asked. What are the advantages or objective of audit documentation or purpose of audit documentation, right? In addition to main purposes we discussed, there are some more additional purposes, right? So first, basic purposes, two basic purposes, then additional purposes. What are the additional purposes? Right? So, first, assisting the engagement team to plan and perform the audit. Based on the last year working papers, you can, the audit team members can plan and perform the current year's audit. So that is why it is given assisting the engagement team to plan and perform the audit. So if you want to understand the audit, if you want to get more knowledge, you have to go through all files related to audit institution. That is called permanent audit file or current audit file. All the informations are given in the working papers or documentation. So assist the audit team or engagement team to plan and perform the audit. That is the first additional objective. Second one, assisting the members of the engagement team responsible for supervision and supervise the audit work and discharge their review responsibility in accordance with SLA US 220. SLA US 220 is related to the quality control. To ensure the quality control of the quality of the work, there may be in the audit firm, there may be a supervision, review, and directions. Direction, supervision, review. How can do this direction, supervision, and review? Without documentation, without working papers, it is difficult. So assistant work, senior officers through the documentation or working papers, they can supervise the work. What are the work completed? What are the work not completed? What are the problems in the audit work? All based on that, they can give directives how to do this work. Through the working papers only, the members of the team properly direct and supervise. So direction, supervision, and review, right? The supervision, direction, everything is done through the working papers. Without working papers, if it is a manual work, you can go and see how the employees is working. But this work, you can't go and see, but you can only go through in the go through the working papers only. You can supervise or directions and review the work done by the subordinate officers. Right. Third additional purpose is enabling the team or engagement team to accountable for its work. So answerable. So if there is no working papers, you don't know who has done this working, who has done this particular work, who is answerable, right? So if the documentation is not there, there is no accountability, right? So working papers or documentation provide accountability for the work done, right? So if there are any problems related to the work, audit problem, so they can answer them. The accountability means answerable for these actions, right? So working papers or documentation enabling the team, auditing team, to be accountable to the work done, right? For its work done. Then uh, next additional objective, retaining a record of matters of continuing the significance to future audit, right? The future auditing matters, you can retain the record of matters of continuing significance to future audit. Certain matters is needed for the future audit. So you can you can take this documentation as a retaining record, right? So for the future references, right? Uh, so these are the, is there some more additional objective? Enable the conduct of quality control reviews and inspection in accordance with it. The working papers or documentation facilitate the quality control reviews and inspections. That is Sri Lanka standard for quality control number 1 that we are not discussing, but according to this the quality control standard, quality control review and inspection is needed. So for the work done, auditing work, quality control reviews and inspection. So for this purpose, working papers provide all information. Then enabling the conduct of external inspection in accordance with the applicable legal, regulatory or other requirements. So sometimes special investigation or legal police or other regulatory bodies needed to inspect, right, the work done or any audit matters. So that is the working papers provide evidence to conduct external inspection, evidence or information to conduct external inspection in accordance with the applicable legal, regulatory, and other requirements. So these are the additional objectives, additional purpose of the work, the documentation or working papers. There are 6 additional main purpose, 2 main purpose, and 6 additional purposes assisting the engagement team to plan and perform the work, assisting the members of engagement team responsible for supervision and direction. So then the proof, the enabling the engagement team to be accountable for its work. Then the working papers provide as a retaining a record of for the future audits. Then the quality, according to the quality control reviews and inspection, the working papers or documentation is provide necessary informations and evidences. And then conduct, if it is necessary, to conduct external inspections uh, in accordance with the applicable legal and regulatory or other requirements. All the informations and evidence can be provided. These are the 6 additional purposes. So I hope you can understood this purpose, additional purposes, 6 additional purposes, right? Then objective of auditor to provide, to prepare the documentation. Objective of the auditor, why auditor documents the matters relating to audit. Number 1, sufficient and appropriate record of basis for auditor's report. So without document, without working papers, sufficient and appropriate record is not available. So auditors to prepare the documentation to obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence documents. So basis for the report. Basis for audit report. That is why documentation is needed for auditor. Second one, evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with the Sri Lanka auditing standard. To prove the audit is planned and performed in accordance with Sri Lanka auditing standard and other legal and other regulations. These are the 2 objectives of auditor to maintain working papers or documentation. One is to prove, plan and perform an audit in accordance with Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable legal and other regulations. Second one, to obtain sufficient and appropriate records, to provide sufficient and appropriate records or basis for the auditor's report. These are the 2 objectives of auditor is to prepare the documentation, right? Without documentation, they can't prove, plan and perform the work is in accordance with Sri Lanka auditing standard. Without documentation, there is no basis for opinion in the audit report. So sufficient and appropriate document records is available through the documentation, right? I hope you understood these 2 objectives of auditor to have the documentation, right? Now we are going to discuss some definition. So what is documentation or what is working paper, right? Examiner sometimes ask to define what is audit documentation. Audit documentation is the record of audit procedure performed. That is number 1, the record of audit procedure performed, relevant evidence obtained, and conclusion the auditor reached. Terms such as working papers or working papers are also sometimes used. So the audit documentation means sometimes use the term working papers. So definition is working papers is the record of the audit procedure performed relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusions the auditor reached. This is called audit documentation, right? Audit documentation, you can't, if the examiner asks to define, if you imagine something and written, no marks. So what is expected from you is what is given in the standard, right? Audit documentation is the record of audit procedure. What is audit procedure? Anyone can say what is audit procedure? The different type of audit works carried out by the auditor to achieve the audit objective. Verification, vouching, analytical review, so many type of checking, right? Test of control, substantive, all are audit procedures, right? Analytical review, vouching, verification, so many techniques are there. That is called all audit procedure. Audit procedure means different type of audit work carried out by the auditor to achieve the audit objective. So here, documentation means the record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusion the auditor reached. There are three matters should be included in the definition. The record of audit procedures performed by the auditor, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusion the auditor reached. This is called audit documentation. Next one, audit file. Audit file. What is file? Audit file. You can understand what is this. But right? That is a expected definition. Is that standard definition is given in the auditing standard. Audit file, one or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form. Audit file means one or more folders. File contains folders. It may be one or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form. Sometimes audit file may be physical file or electronic file. This file containing the records that comprise the audit documentation for specific engagement. That records this audit file containing the records that comprise the audit documentation for specific engagement. This is the definition relating to audit file. Right? Next one, experienced auditor. Experienced auditor, an individual, whether internal or external to the firm. He may be external auditor or internal auditor, who has practical audit experience and reasonable understanding of audit process, Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements, the business environment in which the entity operates, and auditing and financial reporting issues relevant to the entity's industry. This is called, he must have knowledge on this area, this 4 area. So that is a experienced auditor, an individual. He may be internal or external to the firm, who has a practical audit experience. Experienced auditor means who has a practical audit experience. If you have, you may complete chartered exams. You may complete a chartered exam, but you don't have a practical experience. You are not treated as an experienced auditor. So the experienced auditor must have a practical audit experience and a reasonable understanding on what reasonable understanding of audit process, Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable and legal and regulatory requirements. So that experienced auditor must have thorough knowledge on Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements. If you want to audit the university audit, all the legal University Act provisions, Finance Act provisions, in other circulars, regulations, everything you should know. That is why called experienced auditor must have a practical knowledge and reasonably understanding of Sri Lanka auditing standard and applicable legal and regulatory requirements and the business environment in which entity operates. Legal environment and industry in which, if it is a textiles, imports, export, you should identify what are the industry in which the audit entities operate. Then he must have a understanding and thorough knowledge on auditing and financial reporting issues relevant to the entities industry. So everything must have these four aspects. He should, in addition to the practical auditing experience, he should have a thorough knowledge on these four areas. Then only he can treated as an experienced auditor. So now I hope, right, you may understand these three definitions: what is audit documentation, what is audit file, what is experienced auditor. So this definition you can understand. Right. Next we will move on to next area, form and contents of the audit working papers. So form and contents, right? This is given in the explanatory note. I will go to directly explanatory note. This form and contents means you don't think the working papers is not form and contents is not same contents or forms to all audits. It may be differ audit to audit with the certain factors, right? So here uh, uh, this form and contents, paragraph 8, according to paragraph 8, wait, we'll see the paragraph 8. The auditor shall prepare audit documentation that is sufficient to enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit to understand. So, if the auditor uh, does not have previous experience in audit, he can easily understand, enable to sufficient to enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with the auditor to understand, right? This form and contents uh, we will come to directly. The form and contents. The form and contents means that Form means the uh, the contents. Form means design. You can't design the same documentation of file to audit all audits. It may be differ. Auditors using the working papers or documentation is differ to audit. These form and contents are affect with the certain factors. You should know what are the factors depending on the form, contents and extent of audit documentation, depending on factors such as, right? There are three things: form, content, and extent of documentation. So, all right. What are the factors affect form, content, and extent of documentation? Form, content, and extent. Form, content, and extent of documentation affect or depend on certain factors. So you should know what are the factors affect the form, contents, and extent of documentation or working papers. The first factor is the size and complexity of the entity. Depending on size, sometimes the auditing entity may be on in Sri Lanka only. Sometimes entity size that having more branches in the whole island or in abroad. So depending on size, form and content and extent of working papers differ. And complexity of the entity. Sometimes some audit entities uh, deal with the foreign exchange transactions. There are complexity. Some entities deals with the export import. So the complexity of the entity and size of the audit entity, form, content, and extent of working papers will affect. Then second factor is the nature of the audit procedures to be performed. Depending on the nature of audit procedures to be performed, uh, the form, content, and extent of working papers may be differ. Then third one, identify risk of material misstatement. Depending on risk of material misstatement. Fourth one, significance of audit evidence obtained. Fifth one, nature and extent of exception identified. Exceptions. What are those exceptions? So there may be a routine transaction. Sometimes exceptional transaction, exceptional, sometimes illegal transaction, legal payment. That is exceptional. Exceptions identified. That is not relevant to the particular business. That is called exception identified. Depending on that, form and contents of the working papers may be differ. Then need to uh, document a conclusion or basis for a conclusion not readily determinable from the documentation of the work performed or audit evidence obtained. So the need to document a conclusion or basis for the conclusion, depending on needs, right? Depending on needs of the documentation. Then last one, audit methodology and tools used. Sometimes uh, audit is audit methodology or tools may be manual or electronic. Sometimes to carry out auditors can be used audit softwares or electronical audit environment. Uh, so in electronic, Please unmute. Some noises are coming. Right. So depending on methodology or tools, methodology means how to carry out your audit verifications, vouching, uh, other audit procedures. Sometimes manually carry out. Sometimes you may use the audit software. Depending on that, depending on methodology and tools used, the form, content, and extent of working papers may be differ. So these are the factors affect the form, contents, and extent of working papers or documentation. So this area very often several exams they are testing form contents and extent of working papers depend on what factors. So I hope you may understood this area. This is not difficult to understand, right? So that I am repeating once again, the size and complexity of the entity, the nature of audit procedure to be performed, the identified risk of material misstatement, the significance of audit evidence obtained, the nature and extent of exceptions identified, the need of to the document or conclusion or basis for the conclusion, or the audit methodology and the tool used by the auditor. These are the factors. These are the factors uh, affect the form, contents, and extent of working papers or documentation. I hope you understood. Students, can you understand this? Do you understand or not? Is it okay? I need the feedback from you. Students, can you understand this one? Is there any problem? Can you hear me? No response.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much that you have tried. Your response is there. So thank you very much because unless otherwise the feedback from you, I can't proceed. Right. So we have to cover this up to this form and contents of working papers. Form and contents of working papers we covered. Next one, examples of working papers. Right, you should know what to include in the working papers. So this also several time test. Some the students are failed to answer properly. Right, the documentation may be uh, recorded on paper or on electronic or other media. Example of audit documentation include. So you should know examples of audit documentation. Includes what? Audit programs. What is audit program? So far we have not studied audit program. Based on the audit plan, audit each and every audit areas, auditor prepared, senior auditor prepared, audit programs, what are the audit in the program, they can include what type of test to be carried out, when you carry out, when you complete, to whom, assigned to whom, right? The resource needed, the period covered, everything is given in the audit program. We'll study later. This comes under the audit plan. planning standard we can today or tomorrow we can discuss. So audit program, one of the documentation of working paper, right? Then analysis. Analysis means you may have to calculate so many ratios, profitability ratios, investment ratios, capital ratios, turnover ratios, several ratios, especially for the analytical review. One of the audit techniques auditors used, according to SLA, US 520, analytical review. So when you carry out analytical review, you may have to analyze all these transactions, fluctuations, inconsistencies, ratios. All the analysis also includes in the working papers or documentation. That is a second example of the working papers. Third example of working papers is issues memoranda. What is memoranda? Memoranda means journal, some written documents, right? Those some memoranda that is called short notes or written documents. These are also called working papers. Then summaries of significant matters. When you carry out audit, all the significant audit matters, significant summaries to be prepared by the auditor. All these summaries, significant summaries, also called working papers of documentation. Other one is letters of confirmation and representation. What is confirmations? Auditors, when they see the balance sheet, there are balances, debtors balances, creditors balances, bank balances. These balances, the balance sheet, only one figure is there. But the bank balances, there may be several banks. Debtors, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 debtors. Creditors, 2,000, 5,000 debtors. So all this, to confirm all these balances, auditors are directly communicate with those people and get the balance. That is called confirmations. That is a specific standard letters are there for the year-end balances confirmation. Bank confirmation, debtors, creditors confirmation. Sometimes, if there are any dispute, auditor asks from the management to give a representation letter. Those letters also included in the working papers. Representation letters, letter of confirmation, checklist, correspondence, email, right, concerning significant matters, all are called working papers, right? This is given here, the example of working papers. The auditor may include abstracts or copies of the entity's records. For example, significant and specific contracts and agreements as a part of audit documentation. Audit documentation, however, is not a substitute. However, it's not a substitute uh, substitute for the audit entity's accounting records. So, any abstracts or copies of the entity's record, right? That's also part of the audit documentation, right? Uh, Audit documentation, however, is not a substitute for the entity's accounting record. It is not a substitute. This is documentation of working papers is a property of the auditor. You can't say this is a substitute of the accounting records, right? This is for the purpose of the this provide information, sufficient and appropriate records. This ensure the audit is properly and planned and properly executed in accordance with the Sri Lanka auditing standard. That is why auditors are getting all this analysis, confirmations, computations, checklist, correspondence, summaries, representation, right? Issues, memoranda, right? Everything is called audit program. Audit program also very important documents. All are called examples of documentation, right? Examples of documentation, right? I will directly. I hope this you can understand these examples of documentation, right? So now we will categorize uh, permanent audit file and current audit file. These are the according to these standard specific audit documentation requirements according to SLAS 210. The terms of audit engagement. There's a that audit engagement letter should be documented according to quality control. Uh, for an audit financial statement, there must be a documentation. 240, the responsibilities relating to fraud and audit of financial statement. Uh, According to this standard, documentation needed. According to SLAS 250, laws, consideration of laws and regulations in an audit of financial statement, documentation needed 260, 300, 350, 320, 330. There are several standards request to documentation, related party transaction. So these are the several specific audit documentation requirements given in the standards, right? So uh, now we will, there are two more, two more part in this area. We'll see. Example of working papers. Then in the recurring audit, there are two categories of working papers. One is permanent audit file, other one is current audit file. What is permanent audit file? What is current audit file? That information relating to the uh, uh, continuous audit, not for the particular financial year, but this information is needed for the future financial years. That is the information in a permanent nature are kept in the permanent audit file. The information contained in the permanent audit file are not used for the particular year audit, but used for the even prior previous audit. For example, company's memorandum of uh, association, article of association, uh, company's organization chart, company's legal documents, legal agreement. These are the permanent information. That is not used by the auditor for the particular financial year audit, but used for the each and every financial year audit. That is called permanent audit file. Current audit file means the information contained in this file is used only for the current year's financial year audit, for a current year financial statement, current year uh, uh, audit queries raised by the auditor, audit program, current year audit program, current year audit plan, uh, extract of audit queries, bank reconciliation, copies of the bank reconciliation. Those are the information kept in the current audit file. So you must know in the recurring audit that is, those are not given in the standard. In the recurring audit, all the working papers or documentation can be categorized uh, permanent audit file and current audit file. You should thoroughly know what is permanent audit file, what are the contents of the permanent audit file, what is current audit file, what are the contents of the current audit file. I will give you some example when we are writing these questions, right? Then last one in this standard, confidentiality, safe custody and retention. Confidentiality, safe custody and retention. Confidentiality, safe custody, ownership and retention. One is confidentiality, safe custody, ownership and retention. So, according to the standard, auditor should adopt appropriate procedure. Battery low, right? Auditor auditor should adapt the standard also there. Confidentiality means ragasyam kernel. Uh, you must you can't disclose the auditor should not disclose the working papers to the other party without permission, without obtaining permission of the auditee institutions or management of the auditee organizations. So you must take adequate or appropriate procedure for maintaining the confidentiality and safe custody of the working papers. So that is confidentiality and safe custody, and retaining for the based on the legal requirements. So normally all the documents according to the Bill of Exchange Act, normally they must have 6 years period. So you must retain for at least 6 years period. And ownership, working papers are the property of the auditors. You can't disclose to others, right? Portion or extract from the working papers may be made available to the entity at the discretion of the auditor. If the entities wants to ask uh, some working papers, but can you give these working papers to the auditing entity? That is discretion of the auditor. If it is necessary, portion of the working papers can be disclosed, right? Uh, they are not, the working papers are not substitute for the entity's accounting records. That is you must keep in mind, right? The auditor can disclose to the third party if it is a legal requirements or court sometime asks. Sometimes you should the Right to Information Act. According to Right to Information Act, anybody can ask any information. So sometimes the general public can ask from the Auditor General to show the working papers. So in this situation, the confidentiality may be breached, right? So if there are any legal courts also can ask, right? So in that situation, auditor can disclose uh, the information given in the working papers, right? Unless otherwise, generally not disclosed. Unless otherwise legal requirements or Right to Information Act, or if the entities ask, a portion of the working papers can be given with the discretion of discretion of the auditor. Generally, working papers are prepared by the auditor. That is a property of the auditors. Right. These are the areas we covered. I will give you some notes regarding the permanent audit file and current audit file. Right. Permanent audit file and current audit file. Wait, I will give you the you can write down permanent audit file. You can write down permanent audit file. I hope you are writing permanent audit working file, permanent audit working paper file contains information obtained by the auditor which is relevant which is relevant on a permanent basis. Which is relevant on a permanent basis. Therefore, such information is relevant not only to current year audit, but also for future audit. I hope you all written what is permanent audit file. Permanent audit working files contains information obtained by the auditor, which is relevant on a permanent basis. Therefore, such information is not relevant. Such information is relevant not only to current year under audit, but also for future audits. So this information, the information contained in the permanent audit file, not relevant only to the current year's period. This information used by the auditor for the future audit also. Right. Next subheading, contents of permanent audit files. Contents of permanent audit file. Students, are you writing? Contents of permanent audit file. There are several contents, but I am going to give 5 examples. Right. One, information concerning the legal and organizational structure of the entity. The first one, information concerning the legal and organizational structure of the entity. That is a permanent one, not relevant to the particular year of the audit, but this information is used for the future audit, right? That is number one, information concerning the legal and organizational structure of the entity. Second one, extracts or copies of important legal documents. Extract or copies of important legal documents. Third one, information concerning the industry, economic environment, and legislative environment within which the entity operates. Next one, evidence of planning process including audit program and any changes thereto. Next one, evidence of auditor's understanding of of the accounting and internal control system. Next one, materiality level. Materiality level. Materiality level. Next one, standing orders given by the client. Next one, statutory requirements. Statutory requirements to be complied by the client. To be complied by the client. Next one, the names, address, specimen signatures, the name, address, and specimen signatures, right, right and duties, rights and duties of the responsible officers. Checked. Speed is low. Right, okay. The name, address, specimen signatures, rights and duties of the responsible officers. Right. Now, these are the few examples I have given. There are so many informations kept in the permanent audit file. For the understanding purpose, I have given a few examples or few contents in the permanent audit file. Next, we will write down the current audit file. You can put the title current audit file. The current audit files information, the current audit files information which is relevant to the auditor, only in relation to the current period under audit. Such information is not relevant in the audit of future. Such information is not relevant in the audit of future period. Next one, contents of current audit file. Contents of current audit file. Write down one by one. Analysis of transaction and balances. Analysis of ratios and trends. Record of the nature. Record of nature. Timing and extent of audit procedure performed. Record of nature, timing, and extent of audit procedure performed, and the result of such, right, I will repeat, record of the nature, timing, and extent of audit procedure, audit procedures performed, and the result of such procedure. That is a third example, third contents. Next one, evidences that work performed by assistants, evidences that the work performed by assistant, evidences that work performed by assistants was supervised and reviewed, was supervised and reviewed. Next one, copies of communications with the copies of communications with copies of communications with other auditors, comma, expert and other parties, expert and other parties. The trial balance for the period, the trial balance for the period. Confirmation received from the debtors, creditors, and bank. Confirmation received from the debtors, creditors, and bank. Copies of bank reconciliation. Copies of bank reconciliation statement. Copies of bank reconciliation statement. Transactions of unusual and non-recurring nature. Transaction of unusual and non-recurring nature. These are the few examples for the contents of current audit file. So you should know what is permanent audit file and current audit file. Right. So these are the main areas for this standard, right? There are some more sections are there. I omitted assembly of final audit file. Those are the matters I am ignored, right? So up to now we have discussed these are the areas. You can put some 4 or 5 questions. We have omitted the last standard questions we have not given. Anyhow, you can take this the question from this standard. Uh, you can write down what are the purposes of audit documentation? What are the purposes of audit documentation? The second one, state the objective of auditor. State the objective of auditor is to prepare documentation. State the objective of auditor is to prepare documentation. Question number 3. Define the following terms. Define the following terms. As per SLA US 230. Define the following terms as per SLA US 230. A. Audit documentation. B. Audit file. C. Experienced auditor. C. Experienced auditor. What is the question number, students? What is the next question number?
4.
Fine, 4. Question number 4. What are the factors? What are the factors affect the form, comma, content and extent of audit documentation? Question number 4. What are the factors that affect? What are the factors that affect the form, comma, content and extent of audit documentation? Question number 5. Question number 5. State 5 examples of audit documentation. State 5 examples of audit documentation. State 5 examples of audit documentation. Question number 6. What do you understand by permanent audit working paper file and current audit working paper file? Next one, question number 7. State 5 contents of permanent and current audit working paper files. State 5 contents of permanent and current audit working papers file. What is the question number? Last one. 7 or 8? Students?
8.
8. This is the last one. State note on confidentiality, comma, ownership, comma, safe custody, and retention of working papers. Retention of audit working papers. State note, not state note. So we start from this. Briefly explain the confidentiality, comma, ownership, safe custody, and retention of working papers. uh, I can wind up this standard, right? Not class, wind up the standard, right? That this is the this is not a difficult standard. This is always testing most of the examinations, professional as well as the examination, competitive examination. The question is selected from this standard mostly. So that important areas we discussed right here. Now we will move on to next standard. Before that, I think it is better to have a break for 15 minutes. We will meet at 10:30, right, students? Is it okay to have a break or shall I continue? Students, students,
Yes, sir.
shall we have a break or shall I continue?
Break, sir.
Okay, thank you. We will meet at 10:30 again, and we'll start the other standard relating to internal audit. That is easy standard, not a difficult one, right? We can finish before 12 o'clock. This
Recording
small
stopped.
standard. Next standard, you must get ready. The next standard is considering the work of internal auditing. SLA US 610.
Recording in
Next standard.
progress.
Right. So we will have a break and meet at 10:30. Okay.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Students, we'll start the next standard relating the standard using the work of internal auditors, Sri Lanka Auditing Standard 610. From this standard, we are going to discuss in this specific area. I don't know whether you can see this board. I have written the board. I don't know whether you can see this board. I will read. These are the areas we are going to cover this standard. SLA US 610 using the work of internal audit. That means external auditor. External auditor, you know that he is a completely outsider from the auditing institution, audit entity. He's a fully independent person, is an external auditor. External auditor, yeah, this standard is relating to mostly applicable for the external auditor. External auditor when using the work of internal audit. That is the standard. Relationship between internal audit function and external auditor. So we must distinguish between the external auditor and internal auditor. Here, the standard gives relationship between internal audit functions and external auditor. We'll discuss what is stated here. So basically, before this start this standard, I want to tell something about internal audit. You know, internal auditor is appointed in addition to the external auditor, mainly very big organizations. In the very big organizations, you can find, in addition to the external auditor, there are some auditors appointed by management or entities management is called internal auditor. This auditor is appointed by the management and scope of the work, what should be done, objective of the work is determined by the management and reporting to the management. This is the part of the internal control system. Internal audit is a part of the internal control system. Internal auditor is not a fully independent person. Whereas the external auditor is a fully independent person outside from the entity who is called upon to express an opinion on the financial statement. But internal auditor is a person carries out independent appraisal within the management activities. That is an advisor or consultant to the management with regard to internal control matters. The day-to-day. So internal control is a whole system of controls established by management, designed by management, the implementation, proper implementation of the internal control system, that responsibilities rest with the management. So internal auditor is assigned to check how the internal control systems are worked out. And he can regularly reporting to the management by pinpointing the weaknesses of the internal control system, as well as his recommendation to, in his report, he has pointed out the recommendation to overcome the weaknesses of the internal control system. So, basically, internal auditor is an employee of the management. When comparing with the external auditor, he is not a fully independent person. He is appointed by the management, reporting the management. Scope of the internal auditor is determined by the management. we'll see the distinction between internal auditor and external auditor later, right? Here in the standard stated, these are the 5 areas we are going to discuss here. Relationship between internal audit function and external auditor. That is first one. Second one, objective of the auditor. Objective of the external auditor. That means external auditor. Why using the internal audit? Right? When using the internal audit work, what should be done? That is objective of the internal audit. We will discuss. Then definition. According to the standard, we will discuss 2 definitions are given in the standard. One is internal audit function. Other one is internal auditor. The examiner always asking to define internal audit function and internal auditor. So you must familiar how to define these terms. Then determine whether and what extent to use the work of the internal audit. So what are the factors to be considered when determining what and whether and what extent to use the work of the internal auditor? Some factors you must consider external auditor, we discussed. Then using the specific work of internal auditor. When external auditor using the specific work, what are the matters to be considered? The last objective, this is a very important area. Objective of internal auditor, or sometimes examiners ask what are the duties of the internal auditor, or what are the scope of the internal auditor. So several days examiners asking this question. Objective of internal audit functions, duties of the internal auditor, or scope of the internal audit according to the standard, right? So we'll study one by one. These are the areas we are going to cover. I think it is better to we discuss better to start this area. We must try to distinguish external auditor and internal auditor, right? These are the common area also normally examiners ask, right? So what are the distinction? The first, this is the internal audit, right? Internal audit. Internal audit. Can you see this board, students? Can you see this board? If you are not answering, I am continuing. Internal audit, here external audit. Right? First is appointment and removal. Or removal. Internal auditor appointed by whom? Removed by whom? You must answer. Unless otherwise your feedback is not given, it is difficult to proceed. Internal auditor, I don't know, you can hear. Right. Unmute. Internal auditor is appointed by whom? External auditor appointed by whom? Students, I don't know whether you are you in class? Students, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We are discussing distinguish between internal audit, differences between internal audit and external audit. So first matter we are taking the appointment or removal. Internal auditor is appointed by or removed by whom? Students, is that mute? Students, I don't know whether you are. Can you hear me? Students?
Yes.
So why can't you answer this? I already explained who is the internal auditor, right? Most of the organization, in addition to the external auditor, management is appointed the auditor, right? Is called internal auditor. This is a part of the internal control system, right? He is appointed to uh, carry out independent appraisal within the management activities. So advisory, this is an advisory function. It's a part of the internal control system. So appointed internal auditor is appointed by the management, right? Whereas external auditor appointed by whom? Appointment, removal, all are done by the manager. That is the first one. Here, external auditor appointed by whom? We have already discussed. External auditor appointed by whom? So, for example, company's external auditor appointed by whom? According to the Companies Act. Who has right to appoint the external auditor? According to the Companies Act, there are three situations. First is shareholders, owners of the companies as shareholders are entitled to appoint the auditors, external auditors at the annual general meeting. Right? Sometimes, some cases, directors also, first auditor, director can appoint. Sometimes either director or shareholders not appointed, registrar of companies also can be appointed. So, in the companies, normally by the external auditor appointed by the shareholders, right? Shareholders. So if it is company, shareholders. If it is public sector auditing, external auditor general is appointed by the president, right? So external auditor is depending on categories, nature of the statute. Statute requires who should be audit, who should be appoint the auditor. But generally, companies shareholder, right? That is one distinguish. Objective. Why this internal audit? Objective. The external auditor's objective is what? Express an opinion on the financial statement. On financial statement. Here, what is the objective? Review an examination of the internal control system. Review or examination internal control system. Right? Independence. Who is more independent person? Internal auditor or external auditor? Who is high independence expect from whom? Internal auditor or external auditor? Students, You should answer this. Is comparatively independence comparatively high? Here, comparatively low independence. Fourth one, reporting. Internal auditor reporting to whom? External auditor reporting to whom? You should answer. I don't know whether you all are in the class or somewhere. Internal auditor reporting to the management or organization, top management. So Eastern University also internal auditor reporting to their performance to the vice chancellor with a copy to UGC. External auditor reporting to the shareholders if it is a company shareholders. But if it is the public sector auditor, auditor generals report to the parliament, right? Then scope. Scope. Scope means extent of work. It should be determined by the management, right? Decided by the management, right? Here, scope is laid down in the statute, right? Or letter of engagement. Scope means nature of the work, what type of areas, coverage of the work, right? If it is a private audit, letter of engagement. If it is a statutory audit, is 11 statute, the state. If it is a public corporation, finance act given the scope of the external auditor. If it is a companies act events. So scope of audit depending on based on the statute is decided. If it is a private auditor, determined in the letter of engagement. Then control frame. Control frame. There is no legal requirements, but external auditor there are statutory requirements: appointment, removal, remuneration, rights, duties, everything are given in the rights, the statutory provisions, right? But here, no legal requirements. But here, if it is a private audit, everything is terms and conditions are laid down in the letter of engagement. Otherwise, if it is a statutory audit, relevant statute spelled out, right? Stipulate the rights of the auditors, duties of the auditors, reporting, scope of the work, everything is given in this right. Appointment, removal, remuneration, everything in the right. Control frame. Uh, number 7, remuneration. Remuneration means salaries determined. If it is a internal auditor, determined by the management. Here, determined by the shareholders. If the shareholders appointed, shareholders, directors appointed by directors, or registrar of companies appointed by the registrar of companies, depending on who appoints the auditor, external auditor, in the case of companies. Then reporting here, internal auditor, there is no specific formats, but public sector auditing, internal auditor, all ministries, departments, and local authorities, internal auditor, that guidelines and reporting formats are issued by the management department of the treasury. How the reporting, quarterly report, final report, reporting formats are there. If it is a private firm, there is no reporting format. But if it is a public sector or private sector, external auditor, he must report according to the standard or regulations. There's a reporting standard we will study, SLA 700 and 705, right? The reporting, if it is a reporting, the external auditor based on the reporting standards or regulations. But here there's no specific format, right? These are the distinction between internal auditor and external auditor. I hope you can understand this, right? Now we will move to the standard Speed up. First, relationship between internal audit, uh, here many entities established, uh, something else. Here many entities established internal audit function as part of their internal control and governance structure. So internal audit is a part of the internal control and governance structure. The objective and scope of internal audit function, the nature of its responsibilities, and its organizational status, including the functions, authorities, and accountability, vary widely depending on the size and structure of the entity and requirements of the management where applicable. So you can't expect all the internal audits function, the scope, right? Function, scope, nature and its responsibilities, organizational status, organization functions of authorities and accountability. So varies depending on organization to organization, right? Size of the organization, structure of the entity, management requirements, and those charged with governance. So you can't find the internal auditors functions, duties, responsibilities are not same always. So if you take universities internal auditor, their scope, function, duties, responsibilities are entirely different from internal auditor of the particular ministries. So it depends on the size of the organization, structure of the organization, management requirements, and those charged with governance. Based on that, internal audit functions are differ, right? Here, responsibilities. External auditor has sole responsibility for the audit opinion expressed, and that responsibility is not reduced by the external auditor's use of the work of the internal audit function on the engagement. External auditor, when he carry out his work, he can utilize the internal auditor's work, right? He is a sole responsibility for the express opinion on the financial state, right? Uh, that responsibility not reduced by the external auditors to use the whether you used or not the external auditor whether he used or not the internal auditor's work, he is sole responsible to express an opinion on the financial statement. Here, according to the standard objective, right? There are two objectives of this auditor, right? True objective of the auditor, objective of the external auditor, where the entity has internal audit function and external auditor expect to use the work of the functions of the function to modify the nature, timing, or reduce the extent of audit procedure to be performed directly by the external auditor. So he can modify his function based on the, if he think he can use the internal auditor, he can modify the nature audit or timing of the audit, reduce the extent of audit procedure to be performed directly by the external auditor are, number one, to determine whether the work of the internal audit function can be used, and if so, in which areas and what extent. So, external auditor, the objective is to determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used. That is first. Internal auditors වැඩ පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? அவர்கிட்ட internal auditor வேலையை பாவிக்கலாமா? எந்த அளவுக்கு பாவிக்கலாம்? If so, පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් in which areas and what extent? මොන areas and මොන ප්‍රමාණ? எந்தெந்த இடங்கள்ல எந்த அளவுக்கு பாவிக்கலாம்ன்றதை தீர்மானிக்க வேண்டும். Right? For that purpose, external auditor to take decisions. That is an objective of the external auditor. One is to determine whether the work of the internal audit function can be used, and if so, පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් in which areas and to what extent. And having made that determination, that is a one objective. That second one, if using the work of internal audit function to determine whether that work is adequate for the purpose of audit. The external auditor should decide if the work is used, the internal auditor's function is used to determine that work is adequate for the purpose of external auditor. Is it adequate? So those things you must, those are the objective of the external auditor. According to the standard, there are two objectives of the external auditor. Right. Then definition, there are two definitions you must keep in mind. Internal audit function. Internal audit function, a function of the entity that perform assurance and consulting activities designing to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance, risk management and internal control process. That definitions are given different textbook differently. According to Institute of Internal Auditor UK, the definition is slightly different, but basically the focus on internal control system. But here, that according to our standard, the internal audit function, the definition is function of the entities that perform assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance, risk management, and internal control process. There are three things. Internal audit functions involve three things. Evaluate and improve the effectiveness of entity's governance, risk management, and internal control process. These are the internal audit functions, right? Functions of an entity that performs assurance and consulting activities. So internal audit is a consultant, independent appraisal, right? At appraisal or evaluation. right? To improve the consulting design to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance, risk management, and internal control process. This is called internal audit functions. Second one, internal auditor. Only that one. Right. That is only one definition is given here. This is revised latest. Right. The determining whether in what areas and what extent the work of external auditor function can be used. Evaluating the internal audit function. So, external auditor, if he thinks the internal auditor's work can be used, certain factors you must consider for this purpose, right? Uh, you must understand this. External auditor determine whether, first is whether, in which area and what extent the work of internal audit function can be used. That evaluation of internal audit function. If I am an external auditor, according to the standard, I have to evaluate the internal audit function. Why I am external auditor evaluating the internal audit function? Why I am evaluating? Whether I use the internal audit work. Second one, which areas of the work done by the internal auditor can be used. Third one, what extent of the work of the internal audit function. There are internal audit functions. We will study the last 7 functions audit. 7 functions carried out by the internal audit. That is objective of internal audit. So, what extent of the work internal audit function can be used. So, external auditor required to evaluate. Why evaluate? Whether can use the internal auditor's work. What area, which area can be used the work done by the internal auditor. Third one, what extent of the internal audit function can be used. There are 3 things external auditor to be considered. For the consideration, there's a duty, external auditor should evaluate the internal audit function. When he evaluates, there are there are 4 matters should be considered by the external auditor, right? First one, the external auditor shall determine whether the work of the internal auditor function can be used for the purpose of audit by evaluating the following. So whether it can use it or not, depending on this. Number 1, extent to which internal audit functions, organizational status, and relevant policies and procedures supported the objective of the internal auditor. So, in simple terms, we can say internal audit function, organizational status, where he puts in the organizational chart how he is responsible in the organization chart, top position or low position, right? And what are the policies and procedures support the objective of the internal auditors. So based on this, we can decide whether we can use the internal auditors work or not. That is the first one, right? Internal audit functions, organization status, and policies and procedures. That is the first one. Second one, level of competency of the internal audit functions. So some organization some junior clerk may be an internal auditor. But big organizations, there may be a chartered accountant or professional qualified person. So external auditor වැඩ පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනද පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්ද මේක decision තීරණ කරන්න ඕන ඒ නිසා check කරන්න ඕන level of competency. Level of competence means how he technically knowledge, experience, how he planned the work, how we document the work, how we perform the work, how we reporting the work. So the level of competency danagandona evaluation karanakota internal audit function evaluation karanakota ekollu balandona competency level of competencies. That is a second point. Second point, when you evaluate, first point, when you evaluate the internal auditor's work, right? When you evaluation, you must check the internal auditor where he puts in the organizational chart, the organizational status. Second one, you should check the level of competency of the internal audit function. Third one, the quality control matters. Internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. ඒකොල්ලගේ වැඩ සම්බන්ධ quality control පාවිච්චි කරනවාද? Right? So whether in third one, when we evaluate, this point also important, evaluating internal audit functions applies systematic and discipline approach, including internal control system. That is third point. These are the 3 points, right? Auditor, external auditor to consider when to determine whether the work of internal auditor function can be used for the purpose of audit file. So when you evaluate, the 3 things you must consider. පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. The second one, internal auditor shall not use the work of internal audit functions if the external auditor determines that if these are there, if this situation, he can decide if this situation and the under following situation, external auditor can decide internal auditor's work should not use the work of internal audit function if the external auditor determines that. First one, the functions, organized status, and relevant policies, procedures do not adequately support the objectivity of the internal auditors. It is not adequate. Policies, procedures, not adequate. Status, organized status is not correct, right? So, in this situation, he should not use the internal auditor's work. Second one, the function lacks sufficient competence. If sometimes junior officer may be appointed as a chief internal auditor, sufficiency, competency is not sufficient. So the external auditor can decide we should not use the internal auditor's work. Then function does not apply systematic and disciplined approach, including quality control. So this situation, he should not use the internal auditor's work. Then determining the nature and extent of work of the internal audit function that can be used, right? So second point, nature and extent of work, right, can be used. These are the matters to be considered. Planning and performing relevant audit procedures, evaluating the audit evidence gathered. The higher the audit risk of material misstatement at the assertion level, with special consideration given to risk identified significant as a significant, The less the internal audit functions organize status and relevant policies and procedures adequately support and objectivity of the internal auditors, the lower of the level of the competency of the internal audit function. These factors, based on these factors, auditor can decide what extent of work and nature and extent of work can be used. Based on these factors, four factors, he can decide what extent can be used. Functions. Uh, Objective of internal audit function or duties of the internal audit function, we have to discuss. The standard is right. These are the definition of internal audit function. Internal audit functions, the objective of internal audit or definition of internal audit functions. Right. Paragraph. Right. The objective and scope of internal audit function typically include assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance process, risk management, and internal controls. So, three things included. This standard is recently revised, right? Earlier standard giving objective, the monitoring of internal control, examination of financial and operating activities, review of operating activities, review of compliance with laws, rules, regulations, and risk management and governance. These are the seven objective or duties given in the earlier standard. This is recently revise the standard. So we have to go according to the revised standard, right? According to the revised standard, the objective and scope of internal audit functions, right? Objective and scope of internal audit functions. Objective and scope. Objective and scope of internal audit functions or duties of the internal audit functions, right? Typically include assurance, 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 consulting activities, assurance consulting activities designed to include, uh, designed to evaluate and improve effectiveness of the improve effectiveness effectiveness of entities governance process, entities governance process, risk management, internal control. Three areas are very, very important for the internal auditors, right? You must check whether the internal control systems are how designed, how effectively operated, how the risk management and governance process. Governance means there are seven aspects in the governance. You know, the accountability, transparency, equity, right? Consciousness. There are law, rule of law, the participation. There are seven aspects in the governance process. So all organization should adopt this governance process. There may be a good governance or bad governance. So internal auditor should check how the governance is going on in the organization. The process, if there are accountabilities weakness, transparencies, right? Rule of law, equity, participation, consciousness, all this to be checked, to check that he must give assurance on this governance process or consulting activities. He can consult how this governance weaknesses, right? How to improve this governance, he can report. Then risk management. Risk management, this is a recent development. So you must how to identify risk, assess the risk, low risk or high risk, how to respond this risk. Every organization nowadays expected to manage the risk. This is risk management activities also responsible the internal auditor and later internal control system. So everything internal auditor is responsible, right? So we'll see activities relating to governance. Internal audit function may assess the governance process in its accomplishment of objective on ethics and values, performance management and accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of the organization, and effectiveness of the communication among those charged with governance, external and internal auditors and management. So this scope is covered this activities relating to governance. So he must cover in this scope governance process in its accomplishment of the objectivities on ethics and values, performance management, accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of organizations, and effectiveness of communication among those charged with governance, external and internal auditors and management. So activities relating to governance, that is a one function, activities relating to governance. That is the first. Earlier standard, this is a last one. One of the internal auditors duty, last one. Nowadays, this is given a priority, these aspects, the new standard, amended standard. Then activities relating to risk management. Internal auditor function may assess the entity by identifying and evaluating significant exposures to risk and contributing to the improvement of risk management and internal control system, right? Effectiveness of the financial reporting process. So these activities of the risk management. The internal audit functions may perform procedure to assess the entities in detection of fraud. So internal audit function perform procedures to assist the entity in the detection of fraud. So uh, uh, detection and prevention of fraud, that responsibilities rest the management. How can we overcome this? The management is assigned this task to the internal audit function. So management is given, management can't give to the external auditor because detection and prevention of the fraud and errors is the management responsibility. So he assigned to the internal audit function to perform procedures to assist the entity to detection of fraud. Third one, activities related to the internal control. Evaluation of the internal control. The internal audit function may be assigned specific responsibility for reviewing controls. Reviewing control. Some organization well designed internal control system. By you can see the flow chart or narrative description or any other model. The control system may be designed properly, right? So internal auditor review this control system. Sometimes well designed but not implemented, right? So internal auditor should review the control system, whether this control system are adequate or inadequate. If it is inadequate, there is a possibility for the irregularities or weakness or fraud. So he should review the control system. He should give a shortcomings in his report, shortcomings and recommendation he can give. Then evaluating the operation, not only reviewing, evaluating the operation and recommending improvement thereto. In doing so, internal audit functions provide assurance on the control. So that is why even the assurance. Assurance means the positive declaration whether these control systems are ensure the prevention and detection of fraud. It is assurance internal auditor should give, right? So, for example, the internal audit function might plan and perform tests or other procedures to provide assurance to management and those charged with governance regarding the design, implementation, and operating effectiveness of the internal control, including those controls that are relevant to the audit. So he can give the assurance. So that activities related to the internal control also that scope of the internal auditor or objective of the internal audit. Right. Other fourth one is examination of financial and operating information. That is fourth duty of the internal auditor. The internal auditor function may be assigned to review the means used to identify, recognize, measure, classify, and report financial and operating information, and to make specific inquiry into individual items, including detailed testing of transactions, balances, and procedures. So, external auditor is sole responsibility to give an opinion on the financial statement. So internal auditor also responsible to examine the financial, not for the opinion, but examination of financial and operating information. That is a point. But other points are explanation. Balance part is explanation for this. What is financial and operating information? The internal auditor function may be assigned to review and measure, used to identify, recognize, measure, classify, and report financial and operating information. For example, depreciation. How the rates are applied, how recognized, how measured, how classified. Expenditure is classified, recurrent or capital, how classified, how expenditure measured, how the expenditure recognized. Everything should be reviewed by the internal auditor and reporting financial and operating information, and to make specific inquiry into individual item. If there are any inconsistency, he can make an inquiry on this item, right? Including detailed testing of transaction, balances, and procedure. This is the internal auditor's objective or duties. That is fourth one. Fifth one, review of operating activities, right? There are 3 E's involved. Operating activities, 3 E's: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Sometimes this is called management audit, right? Nowadays, four is environmental aspects also well known, right? According to the standard review of operating activities, internal audit function may be assigned to review of economy. What is economy? Sikana. All these are input-output relationship: economy, efficiency, effectiveness. Economy means minimum cost, right? If a university wants to send a vehicle to Colombo for the official duties, so this 10% is travel to Colombo from particular to Colombo. If the university assign 10 vehicles, allowed to 10 vehicles to travel, this is uneconomic. University can decide one van to accommodate 10 officers. So this is economy. Whenever the uneconomy is there, internal auditor examine and report. That is why economy. Then efficiency. Efficiency, what is efficiency? Sometimes officers are not complete their tasks within the time frame. Bank reconciliation is serious. Even the adequate staffs are, the excess staffs are there in the finance branch, but there is a delay to prepare the monthly bank reconciliation for 5 or 6 months. So inefficiency. Other one is effectiveness. Effectiveness means achieve the objective, right? However, whenever the objective is not achieved, it is ineffective. For example, Peter Drucker's book, they want a painting to the wall. When they show the painters are appointed to painting the wall, they are very quickly they painted, right, within shortest period, and few amount of paint they utilized, very economically painted, very efficiently worked officers, but later they found the wall is not particular wall, but they are painted to some other wall. The achievement objective is not achieved, so that is ineffective. So the efficiency and economy, efficiency and effectiveness are important in the operation, right? So internal auditor assigned to check, internal auditor scope is included to check how the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of operating activities, including non-financial activities of the entity, including non-financial activities. So that is the fourth one. So the fifth one. Sixth one, review of the compliance with laws and regulations. There are rules, laws, regulations. You have to follow this. If you take universities, there is a rule, UGC rules, finance ministry rules. There are establishment code. There are financial regulations. You must follow this. If there is if there are anything not followed, that is called non-compliance with laws or rules or regulations. External auditors also I reported in this report. Internal auditors specifically, according to the standard, look into this matter. For example, this according to the university circular, this second year examination to be held the particular date. Exam result to be released within the particular date. That is a circular instruction. But university not adapted these rules. That is non-compliance. Likewise, EPF, ETF. So every employees, according to EPF, ETF Act, certain percentage to contribute EPF and ETF. But university failed to deduct their contribution from the salary. So non-compliance. Likewise, if university want to put up the building in the university premises, you want to get clearance from the local authorities. According to Local Authorities Act, MCO, UC ordinance, but failed to get permission, but put the building, unauthorized building. So that is non-compliance. Likewise, there are so many non-compliances. So internal auditor should examine this non-compliances with the compliance. He should review the audit entities compliance with laws, rules, and regulations. Internal audit function may be assigned to review the compliance of the laws, rules, and regulations, internal regulation and external regulations, management policies, directives, and other management with the internal requirements. So he should comply with this. So these are the scope and functions. Examiner may be asked to discuss or state the scope of the internal audit or functions of the internal audit, duties of the internal audit. You must write down. He should look after the governance process, risk assessment process, activities related to the risk assessment process, activities related to the internal control. That is third. Fourth one, review of review of financial and operating activities. Fourth one, review of financial and operating information. Fifth one, review of economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the operating activities. Review of operating activities. That is a fifth task. Under this, internal audit function may assign to review of economy, efficiency, effectiveness. And last one, review of compliance with the laws, rules, regulations. These are the objective or scope of the internal audit. But in the standard, they are explained very lengthily, right? So you can, for the examination purpose, you can give brief note and explain this, right? The governance process, what is included in the governance process, what is risk management, what is internal control, examination of internal control system, right? Examination of financial and operating review, review of operating activities, economy, efficiency, effectiveness, right? Review of compliance with laws, rules, regulations. These are the 6 areas, right? The six or seven, according to the earlier standard. Seven, one, two, three, six, right? Six. We are simply said monitoring of internal control system, examination of financial and operating activities, review of operating activities, economy, efficiency, effectiveness, review of laws, rules, regulations, and risk management, governance process, internal control system. Right. So these are the activities uh, assigned to the internal auditor. Uh, in the financial regulation, government financial regulations also laid down the duties of the internal auditor. Auditing standard also scope and functions of the internal auditor or objective of the internal auditor is given here, right? So you must identify the what are the major duties of the internal auditor or objective or scope of the internal auditor, right? So we'll discuss. We see what we discussed up to now. We discussed distinction between internal auditor and external auditor, right? Or relationship between internal audit function and external audit function. Then objective of the internal auditor, there are two objectives we discussed. The definition of internal audit function only we discussed. Then determine what and uh, whether the external auditor use the work of internal auditor, the evaluation of the internal audit function. When the evaluation of the evaluation of external auditor, evaluation of the internal audit function, what are the factors taken into consideration, then using the specific word, that is a standard audit, there's a factors given in the standard, we are not discussed. Then objective of the internal audit function. This is the main area in the standard, right? So we will write down the question relating to the standard quickly. Students, students, question number 1. What do you understand by the term? What do you understand by the term internal auditing? What do you understand by the term internal auditing? Question number 2. Question number 2. How internal audit is how internal audit is differ from external audit? How internal audit is differ from external audit? Question number 3. Question number 3. Students, right, I will repeat. I will repeat. First question, first one, what do you understand by the term internal auditing? One student's asking to repeat. So I am repeating. Question number 1, what do you understand the term internal auditing? Second one, question number 2, how internal audit is differ from external audit? How internal audit is differ from external audit? I hope you have written. Question number 4, what are the two objectives of the external auditor? What are the objectives of the auditor, external auditor? What are the objectives of the external auditor when using the work of internal auditor? When using the work of internal auditor as per SLAUS, 610. Question number 4. Question number 4. Question number 4. When evaluating the internal audit function, when evaluating the internal audit function by the external auditor, when evaluating the internal audit function by the external auditor, when evaluating the internal audit function by the external auditor to determine whether, comma, in which areas, comma, and to what extent the work of the internal audit function to determine whether, comma, in which areas, comma, and to what extent the work of the internal audit function can be used, comma, what are the factors to be considered, what are the factors to be considered, what are the factors to be considered. That's all. You can, otherwise, you can start from this word. You can start from this word. What are the factors to be considered when evaluating the internal audit function? You can put this word beginning. I start from when evaluating the internal audit function, no? Before that, when evaluating the internal audit function, before that, you can put what are the factors to be considered when evaluating the internal audit function by the external auditor to determine whether, in which area, and to what extent the work of internal audit function can be used. You can put, you can start from what are the factors to be considered. That Vachanava should come front. That word, what factors to be considered first. Then you can start when evaluating. Students, can you understand what I say? I hope you understood. What is the next question? What is the question number? Next question number. Students, what is the question number?
5, sir.
5.
Five. Thank you very much. Number 5 is the last one. Briefly explain. Briefly explain. Briefly explain. Question number 5. Very good. Briefly explain. Briefly explain the function, the objective of internal audit function. the objective of internal audit function. Briefly explain the objectives of the internal audit function as per SLA US 610. Question number 5. Briefly explain the internal audit function as per SLA US 610. The last one, question number 7, last one. State the definition of internal audit function. State the definition of internal audit function as mentioned. State internal audit function as mentioned in SLA US 610. Right. So this standard is we can complete this standard. Most of the areas covered in the standard. I want to know that your study leave. I heard you are given study leave, isn't it? When is your exam schedule? Please answer. We have to plan the remaining part of the lecture program. So, as I have to complete as early as possible. So, please answer my questions. Then only I can plan and I can complete the lecture program as much as early as possible. So, when is your exam schedule? Examination still not scheduled or scheduled? Please answer. Right, one check is there. Inform not yet. Okay. Anyhow, do you know how many lectures hours we have completed up to now? How many class? I have taken three hours class, some classes or 2 hours earlier. And do you know how many lecture program I covered? Anyone knows? Please share. According to information that all other subjects are completed, but unfortunately my lecture program started late. So that is why I am unable to complete within this month. Anyhow, I don't want to take next week other subject mid exams. Okay, we also can fix mid exam next week. Whatever area we covered, right? That is the midterm exam means that is MCQ exam, right? If you have any objection, please give me your objection. Anyone object this midterm exam, right? Midterm exam next week. That is a first week or second week. We can have an exam on MCQ, right? So that is okay. Then I have to list out remaining part of the lecture program. I have to that both. I have to right. I have to list out. We have to study SLAUS 300 late into audit planning, and we have to study SLAUS 700 late into audit report. 705 uh, opinions, modified opinions, the standards, and analytical review 520. These are the uh, four standard remain, right? In addition to that, we can study the audit provisions, certain provisions in the Companies Act, certain provisions in the National Audit Act. These are the areas we have to cover and audit verification of assets and liabilities, and vouching. These are the areas we have to cover. Depending on time, we try to cover, but all these standards are compulsory. We must study this standard, right? I think it is better to have a class. So can you upload the PDF file in LMS? Right, I will arrange the upload the file through the computer, through the coordinator. Yeah, and I am not in a position to upload LMS. That should be done by the management of the university. So I will speak to this matter to the coordinator, right? So we have to expedite the lecture program. Is it possible to have a lectures from today from 6 to 8? Today 6 to 8. 6 to 8 today, 6 to 8 or 7 to 8, and tomorrow also. Tomorrow, this same time. We have to cover all these syllabus, right? Inform, right? Today, uh, if other students all are agreed, please inform whether you can able to participate from today 6 to 8 and tomorrow same times 8:30 to 12 o'clock, right? If we 12:30 or 12 o'clock or 11:45 tomorrow, then we can cover all this standard and additional part also. Other 2-3 lectures I try to complete at even weekdays. So second week we can midterm exam, and based on the questions I have given, we will select 20 questions. I will. You must, when you come to the next class, you bring all this, all the questions, all the standard. What are the standard? How many questions I have given? based on that, I can select how many questions you answered for the assignment, right? So assignment also you have to submit that carries marks, 35% of marks assignment and midterm exam. So based on the review, uh, uh, Moses Sunday we have prayer in morning. So if you have a prayer in the morning, you can inform alternative time. Please cooperate with me because for your benefit, I am try to complete as early as possible. So I agreed Sunday morning, some students go to temple or church. So that is difficult. If you feel difficult, you can fix sometime later or night, right? You discuss with the other students and through your students rep, you can inform. Right? Today and tomorrow, I am prepared to take the class. Right? So when you come to next lecture program, you please bring the what are the from what standard how many question I have given, right? So those information I needed to select some questions from select standard to give assignments. I hope you all are answered, right? So that I have to segregate assignment 1 and assignment 2, right? Assignment 1 and 2, you have to submit and midterm exam, right? So before the examination, we had to do that, right? So that fraud, that SLA US 240, I have not given any questions, right? So that time due to time problem, I am unable to give. Anyhow, if possible, the first one, if possible, you can arrange the class today night, 6 to 8 o'clock. Second one, Sunday class, I am prepared to take lectures on Sunday. If you are not possible in the morning time, some other alternative time, please inform. Third one, you bring the notes in the next lecture. You bring the notes. I have to select some questions for the assignment purpose. Assignment number 1 and assignment number 2. That is third one. Other one, your midterm exam also, we will arrange for the first or second week of the August, right? So these are the information. With these informations, and if possible, please bring the information regarding the how many hours, how many lectures we up to now we have covered. How those information also I need to plan the remaining sections, right? So based on that, we will wind up today's class. If you have any clarification or any comments, you can share with me, students. You can chat. Students, before wind up, I want to I want a comment from when will be held on exam. Actually, the date exam schedule date I don't know. That should be we can get it from the management. I will ask from the coordinator. Sometimes they also don't. They also not informed. Otherwise, she would have informed to me. We will decide later. I want to know, are you in the, now you are given the vacation, study leave, or still not? Please answer. And I want to know what about the other subjects? Are they complete or still not completed? Students, you should answer. Altogether, so 88 students are there no, already. Now come down to 52. Please answer. Yes, still not completed, sir. Okay, still not complete. I am very happy. I thought I am the only person. I am the only person not completed. So anyhow, but for that reason, I want to take long time. So these are the I inform these are the section. These are the only section I have to cover all these sections. This I am not concentrating only for the university exam, but I have to. My target is to students get more knowledge on this subject, because for the professional exam, for the competitive exam, this knowledge can be used. That is my objective, right? So that is why I have to cover as much as possible uh, important areas, right? So I am very happy about this. Others also not completed. Anyhow, if we have extra class, we can in advance, right? And complete the syllabus in time. So we can wind up, I think.
Thank you,
Shall we
sir.
wind up? Yes. Yes. You can speak. Shall we wind up? Yes or no? You should answer. I think you are afraid to others.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, okay. If there is no comment, we will wind up. Thank you very much. I will speak to coordinator and fix that. If possibilities are there, I will fix the class today night. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.